Whatever you've seen in the Western media on TV or read in the press, ignore it or believe the opposite. Nobody's going to tell you everything's going well. That's not going to sell many newspapers. When they come to do business in Russia, is they think, Russians look like we do, therefore they should behave like us.
No.
It's not a book about why Russians don't smile. That's just a provocative title because that's the main stereotype that foreigners have about Russia. Don't be put off by the fact that not everyone smiles. Smiles need to be earned. It took you guys in the States 200 years to get to where you are today. Why do you think we can do it in 200 days?
Because it's Russia. Hello everybody, this is Braiden Consulting. Today we're speaking with Luc Jones.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming. Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте.
Our pleasure. So, you are a persona. You were on TV. You wrote a book, Why Russians Don't Smile. Please. Great. And basically, we would love to know everything interesting about your projects, your future, your past, all of this stuff. So let's go. You have been living in Russia since very long ago. So you were one of the first expats who came in the early 90s and in the 2000s. Please, why have you made the decision to come to Russia at the beginning? And is your education of Portsmouth University, Econ in Russia related to that in one way or another?
Okay, I think like many people to begin with, it was a case of, first of all, curiosity. Like when I grew up in the 1980s, first of all, we were told it was the evil empire. We had propaganda that the only thing we knew about the Soviet Union was gulags or everything's bad about it. And then suddenly Mikhail Gorbachev came and we had Gorbimania, things changed and suddenly it was like, what's this big, horrible, cold country trying to hide from us? Why are they so secretive? Why is it so closed? And I had a chance to come here in February 1991 when I was still at high school, 3 days in Moscow, 4 days in Leningrad. And it was like, ooh, and the metro cost 5 kopecks and there was nothing in the shops to buy.
Sweet Russia.
Yeah, it
Sweet
was
Soviet
like,
Union.
wow. You know, because previously we'd done school exchanges with France and Spain, and then suddenly you're thrown into Moscow, age 17, and we didn't really know what to think because there was almost no information other than what you saw on TV, which was largely negative. So yeah, to begin with curiosity, and then I had a chance to spend a year here studying in 1993, 94, Moscow and Yaroslavl to study Russian language. And a friend and I flew from Moscow to Vladivostok and we took the Trans-Siberian Railway all the way back to Moscow, stopping off in like Khabarovsk, Ulan-Ude, Irkutsk for Lake Baikal. Our university in Portsmouth had an exchange with Novosibirsk, so we had friends there. And you got a chance to see how big the country was. So then it became obviously adventure. You know, the beer was cheap, the girls were cute, everything was new. And then finally it was opportunity that people say, yeah, why do you come to Russia? Well, what you have to realize is that where I come from, I was born in Britain, although my mum's from Canada. And when you grow up in a Western country, whatever you do, there will be 10,000, 100,000 people doing exactly the same thing. So differentiating yourself is extremely difficult. And business was totally new in Russia in the 90s. You know, business was something that evil capitalists did. I mean, literally buying this at one price and selling it for a profit. You would have gone to prison for that. Exactly. In the 1980s. You were what they call a spekuliant or a zhulik, a fartsovshik. They had all these nasty names for people who made money. And then suddenly, literally overnight, it wasn't just good, you had to do it to survive. So the advantage I had was that I grew up in a capitalist country. The other advantage I had was that I came here, obviously I knew English, and then I learned Russian. So that put me in quite a good position, and everything went from there.
How well did they teach you Russian at Portsmouth?
I have to say, unfortunately, Russian is not particularly well taught to foreigners. The main reason for that is there are not enough teachers of Russian language to foreigners. Most of them are simply what we call tyotki. They're Russian teachers of English to you, who after doing this for 20 or 30 years get sent to a country abroad for a year and told, here's a bunch of foreign students, try to teach them some Russian. And of course, we don't understand how complex the grammar is. So if you're learning table, which in Russian is stol, you also have to learn stol, stala, stalia, stalu, stalom, stali, stalov, stalam, stalak, stalami, depending on where it comes in the sentence. And we think that all these case endings were invented just to make our lives difficult. So you can know these things, because even if you learn table becomes table, stol, stali, why is stool, chair, stool, stoolia? And you can know it, but teaching it and explaining it to someone whose native language has a much simpler grammar is more difficult. So that took a while. Obviously, coming here was a lot, let's say, made life easier, because you didn't have a lot of choice. Nobody spoke English at all. There were no signs in English. You had to get things done.
How'd you get along?
With great difficulty. You learned very fast, because one of the biggest differences between, say, where I grew up and Russia is that in Britain, the more polite you are to people, the more chance there is that they will help you. Whereas when I first came here, it was the complete opposite. It was like, "Chonada, what do you want?" And they just assumed you didn't need it. And pushing people, totally goes against our mentality. I mean, my mother says that I've become a bit more arrogant after so many years here. And I said, well, I didn't have much choice. You just don't get anywhere otherwise.
Yeah, you got toughened up in one way
or
the other. We have this little section on business. You as an owner of a business before and after the lately sanctions, what appeared to be the major challenge that you have managed or not to overcome?
I think in general in Russia, you tend to get several years of good times followed by some sort of crash, crisis, whatever you want to call it. And you learn to, as we say in English, make hay while the sun shines. You really have to take advantage of the few good years when there's a real boom, and then adapt very fast to conditions when things are bad. So I was here in 1991, first time ever. Then in 93, literally there was a coup just down the road. I remember being woken up by sniper fire, but I was a student, so it didn't really matter. It was fun. But I was here in 98 when the ruble crashed. So at the time it was 6 rubles to the dollar. We went out for lunch and it was 9. At the end of the day it was 17. End of the week it was 24. So we had 400% inflation within a week. All right, now that is very hard for anyone, let's say in a Western country, to get their head around this.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, so then I actually went abroad. Then I lived in Poland and Czech Republic for a few years. Then we had a great boom time between 2001, 2008. Then you had the global crash, which admittedly Russia actually rebounded from pretty quickly. Yeah, because it was about 9 months or so, because it was a global problem that affected Russia. Then obviously you had the sanctions and the oil crash at the same time in 2014. That was probably the toughest one. Then obviously you had COVID. Then you had the SVO. So you learn to adapt. You learn to, let's say, look at different markets and make sure that you can really very quickly think, okay, what do we do now? And be ready for any downturn. And also, every crash or downturn that we've had has been different. So it's never been a dull time.
Is this stimulating environment is something that interests you, something that drives you, or is it like on the other side?
Sometimes you're like, oh my God, not again. But yeah, I think, you can do very well during the good times here. And I think that's what keeps most expats here. A lot go. I mean, I would say the majority of expats left with the crash of 1998, myself included. I would say 95% left. Very few struggled through 99, 2000. But 2001, 2, people started coming back. A lot of new ones arrived. I mean, literally in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you could walk and talk at the same time, you could make money here. Unfortunately, I don't think those times will ever come back, but it was fun while it lasted.
Well, then how do you take the fact that you've witnessed so much history, so much cultural history in Russia? I'm not saying the world, but in Russia, you have witnessed the key moments that people study in schools right now. How do you understand that? How do you feel that?
We're literally witnessing history. I mean, let's be honest, Russia as a country is only 35 years old. People forget that. I remember, I think it was Mikhail Gorbachev back in about 1988 was asked by an American journalist, are you going to introduce, Western style reforms into Russia, or the Soviet Union then? And he quite sensibly replied, look, it took you guys in the States 200 years to get to where you are today. Why do you think we can do it in 200 days?
Because it's Russia.
Well, yeah, but nothing moves quite that quickly. I mean, let's be honest, Russia has moved at an incredible speed. I mean, it must have been incredibly difficult for people to adapt to the new realities, because let's be honest, during communist times, you essentially received a paycheck for showing up to work. And then literally overnight, whatever it was you were producing was probably useless. People weren't getting paid. Nobody needed what was being produced. And a lot of people didn't know how to earn money. I mean, if you think about it, just look at the difference in the Russian question. In English, we say, how much do you earn? In Russian, you say, сколько ты получаешь? How much do you receive?
How much do you get? Yeah.
How much do you get? Now, we don't have this concept of getting something for nothing. You have to earn it.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, the difference that the mentalities kind of get to at one point or another. But coming back to business, so you do recruiting, that's your thing. What are the new difficulties then that the industry has faced compared to the early 2000s? And but the 90s weren't like, it didn't exist, so let's say early 2000s.
I mean, recruitment is a very feast and famine business globally. So we do very well when times are good and we struggle when times are tough, because whenever there's any kind of downturn or uncertainty, hiring stops. That's the first thing that companies stop doing, is bringing on new staff. They put all new roles on freeze and they'll make do with what they have. So as a recruitment agency, oops, what do you do next? So
what do you do next?
Well, obviously, we are not hiring is never actually true. Even if companies cut 5 people, they'll probably hire 1 in their place. There are always roles. Another thing that I brought on was what we call outplacement. Now, this is very new to Russia, because companies will typically cut staff during bad times and they make people redundant and they say, okay, here's your severance, 1, 3, 6, 12 months, here you go, have a nice life. Now, what typically happens in Russia is people are sort of very offended that they've been kicked out through no fault of their own, and they take this severance package and they go to the dacha and, or if they got lots of money, go to Goa or Bali and drink beer and sort of sulk. And then when the money runs out, they think, I need to look for a job. Yeah. But first of all, having a sort of 3, 6, 9 month gap on your resume is not great. You sort of lose a lot of contacts. But a lot of these people don't have necessarily much experience of looking for a job. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I heard the expression, oh, I've never looked for work, work always found me, I would have retired by now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And I say to people, that's great, I'm delighted for you, but at some stage, you're going to have to look for a job. And one of the big differences is that networking, as we know it, is still in its infancy in Russia.
Still?
Yeah. I mean, people like you know what it is, but most don't. It's changing. The last 5 years have been great, but I always joke that networking in Russia is like niet and working, because a lot of people are still sort of suspicious of outsiders. Why would I want to talk to that person? What's he going to do for me? And it's not about what they're going to do for you now. It's about how they could be useful for you in the future. So the outplacement programs were not just about helping people to find jobs, but about helping them to help themselves to get back into the workplace. So we ran programs like this during downturns. But coming back to the original question, I think one of the main things about recruitment, which I like to joke about, is that we are the only business in the world where the product can say no. All right.
That's
so
a shame,
if you're selling, this water or this table, these products don't decide which shop they're going to be in. But a candidate can say, I don't want to go and work over there. And you never have an equilibrium in the right number of vacancies for the right number of candidates. It's always this or this. So it's about getting it right. Also, a lot of Russian companies even to this day, still don't fully understand the benefit of using a recruitment agency to hire people. They think, well, I'll phone my college buddies or my friends, relatives, my neighbor at the dacha could be a good fit. I'll place an ad, I'll talk to HR. But the good candidates, especially ones at the more senior level, they're not looking for a job. They're not browsing job ads. They're very happy where they are, thank you very much. And they don't respond to an automated message. So this is where an executive search agency can, let's say, add a lot of value. So I think one of the differences is that good Russian companies, the more international, more progressive companies, do realize that there is some value that can be added by an external agency.
What's the percentage of these companies?
Very hard to say because,
approximately,
I mean, it depends how you classify someone that's international. I mean, some companies might still be very Soviet style, but for whatever reason, use an agency. You can't give a percentage figure on that because it's too subjective. What I think is international, somebody else won't.
But in the broader sense, no?
It's improved a lot. I mean, there are many Russian companies which, literally focus purely on the Russian market, have no intention of doing anything abroad because they don't need to. And to be honest, that's a global thing. There's a lot of companies that will never go outside their home market and they have no intention of doing so because they don't need to. Unless you live in, Andorra, or San Marino. There's a huge domestic market in Russia. You've got 140-something million people. It's big. Why would you want to start wasting time going to other countries, especially where the markets are more saturated, where you've got a very undersaturated market in Russia? Nobody's going to tell you everything's going well. That's not going to sell many newspapers.
Yeah, okay, great.
Unemployment is extremely low at the moment in Russia.
Great stuff. Good to know.
Yeah. I mean, look, I would say that there's probably a surplus of people towards the top end because a lot of international companies left the market about 3 years ago and they cut people, and these companies were quite generous in terms of the salaries they paid, the corporate benefit packages, and the parachute, as you say, the severance package that they gave people. So if somebody was previously earning 350 or 400,000 rubles a month and they were given 9 months salary, how motivated are they going to jump into a new job at 250? And a lot of people didn't necessarily find a job at the same level. But there's an expression in English, if you're in work, you can find work. So it's better to be doing something at a slightly lower level. 250,000 rubles is better than no rubles. Obviously, a lot of people went abroad. A lot of international companies tried to send their candidates to different countries to relocate them, place them in Europe, Middle East, somewhere else. So some stayed. There's a lot more international companies here than people realize. Some have been renamed, or they've gone, under the radar, as we say. They're operating under a slightly different name, but many are still here.
The message is don't go to Goa or Bali. Go on and stay working. That's the most
Do you know what?
important thing.
What I would say is, if you want to go to Goa or Bali or sit at the dacha, that's fine. But start your job search immediately. Do it while you're relaxing. There's nothing wrong. We live in let's say, a hybrid world now. Probably the one benefit of COVID is that we're not sort of handcuffed to offices anymore. That if you want to sit somewhere else and send out some CVs, make calls, it doesn't matter where you are. Whether you're at the dacha or halfway around the world, you can have calls, message people, and make sure that you can keep in touch. It's much better than doing nothing and then waiting for it, because a job search can be a full-time job.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've experienced that in the recent times when I was trying to find a job. So yeah, good to know. Let's go on then. Country-specific issues a business is bound to experience in Russia. What is or are the issues a business has to deal with here exclusively?
I think one of the main things here is that, and this is something that generally Russian companies will be used to, the fact that there is quite a lot of bureaucracy, but there is a system to it. And if you grew up in it, you'll know how to deal with it. I think what I found is that as a foreigner, you are often quite far removed from a lot of the, let's say, day-to-day complexities of Russia. just because you don't need to deal with things like this, which make things easier.
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake that a lot of foreigners make when they come to do business in Russia is they think, Russians look like we do, therefore they should behave like us.
No.
No, exactly. You know that. I know that. But people coming for the first time will think, well, okay, if I go to Asia or the Middle East or Africa or even Latin America, people look different. So it's natural that they will behave differently. But I would say with Russia, one of the main differences is that Russians are very direct in how they speak. And this actually, once you get used to it, saves you a lot of time because you know where you stand. You know, if you look at the Asian way of doing business, you will almost never say no. Nobody says no. If a Japanese guy says, I will do my best, that probably means no. I worked in India for 1.5 years, and you know, if an Indian says to you, yes, sir, that usually means something between I'm listening and I don't understand.
Oh my God.
Right? When I worked in Saudi Arabia, same thing, that you meet somebody, you do a presentation, yeah, that's interesting. We need to bring you back in to meet the person from the purchasing department, and eventually you get another meeting because nobody's in a rush, and this week we're drinking coffee, and next week
about that, yeah.
there's a religious holiday, and after that somebody's busy, not quite sure what they're doing, but they're busy. And eventually you come back in and then you do a presentation to that person, and we need to meet somebody from finance. And you don't know if the process is slowly moving forward or they're just spinning you around. As you say,
backwards.
Or backwards. Or in Russian you say dinama, dynamit. You don't know this. Whereas in Russia, if someone's not interested, they'll tell you. Look, we're not interested, it's too expensive, we don't need it, we're using somebody else. But at least if somebody says niet, then you think, okay, well, what do we need to do to change it from a niet to a da? And if the answer is, look, nothing, well, okay, you don't waste any time on it. But a lot of the time you can say, look, is it the price? Or is it something else? Have you found another supplier? Are you working with a competitor? What's your situation? When, not at the moment, well, when's a good time to get back in touch? And typically, Russians will tell you this. Russians are not particularly worried about hurting your feelings in this respect. Now, it does take a little bit of getting used to, because, again, coming from our cultures, we will try to help people, even if it's not necessarily to their benefit. One girl in the office, Russian girl, said, Luke, why do native English speakers say not really when they actually mean no? I thought to myself, good point.
So, what's the answer?
I think no sounds like, yeah, it's very sharp. Again, Russian is very direct. So if you think about it, открой окно, in English we say, would you be so kind as to open the window, please? Now, in Russian, nobody is going to say, будьте добры, а вы не могли бы, пожалуйста, для меня открыть окно. This would just be ridiculous.
For sure, yeah.
Now,
a waste of time.
Exactly. Too many superfluous words. In the same way that in English, if you wanted to say, there is a bottle of water on the table, in Russian you would say, na stole voda, on table water. So you just keep it shorter, it's brief, and it's to the point. So you're thinking, why do you need all these extra words?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, totally. So a lot of things you're saying are from the book. Where can you find the book?
Ask me nicely and I'll give you a copy. We don't sell it on Amazon or anywhere else for that matter. To be honest, it's more of a PR tool. It is a myth buster. It's not a book about why Russians don't smile. That's just a provocative title because that's the main stereotype that foreigners have about Russia. Russians say to me, oh, foreigners think that there are bears walking along Red Square with balalaikas. And we're like, no, that's what Russians think foreigners think. We think that it's cold all year round, everyone drinks vodka, no one smiles, and there are tanks going down the street and you need to wear a bulletproof vest because the Russian mafia are shooting. So that is one of the main things, but it's a myth buster. So, one of the things I had in here was, for example, frequently asked questions for people planning to visit Russia for the first time. So what's it like in Russia? Is it always cold? Do you have to drink heavily to do business? Is it dangerous? How do I get around, if I don't understand the funny writing? What about corruption? What about sanctions? And why does no one ever smile?
Well, then what is the advice you would give to a foreigner coming? What should they be prepared in their daily life? So like no hot water 2 weeks in the summer, like this kind of stuff.
Honestly, the first thing I would say, if you're coming here, making your very first visit, I would say whatever you've seen in the Western media on TV or read in the press, ignore it or believe the opposite. The first reaction that the majority of people have from anywhere for that matter, we have a lot of Indian guests at the moment, and honestly the first reaction is, oh wow, it's normal. I never thought it was going to be like this. People are genuinely surprised at how safe it is in the evenings in Moscow. And I say, where do you get this idea that it's dangerous? I think you've been watching too many Cold War movies.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. So anything else just that sparks your mind right now at the moment?
I would say if you can learn some Russian, even if you learn the alphabet, you can learn that in 20, 30 minutes. Pick up a textbook on the plane. The Cyrillic alphabet is actually not that hard to learn. Learn a few words. Have a look at the geography. Maybe learn just a little bit about the history, a little bit about Russia for getting around. Russians will be impressed with that because, as I said earlier, the level of English here is still very poor, particularly spoken. It's improved, and there are more signs in English, especially in downtown Moscow, but go outside of an A-grade office and you're probably going to struggle a bit. But don't be put off by the fact that not everyone smiles. Smiles need to be earned.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
People don't smile for no reason. So I can remember hearing from Russians who went to America for the first time, like, Americans are like, how are you doing? And Russians are like, ooh, they're interested in how I'm doing. And I'm like, they're not. How are you doing means hi. And it's just being polite.
A dull hi as well sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I like, I didn't make this up by the way, is the peach and the coconut. So an American is like a peach. So it's very soft on the outside, very easy to get to know people, but it's a bit superficial. To become close friends with someone is like the stone of the peach. The Russian is more like the coconut. So it's very tough on the outside. What do you want from me? But once you become friends with people, they will do anything for you. So like the inside of the coconut.
Very tasty as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Now to the other side of the conversation. Tell us about your role in British or international expat clubs in Moscow. So there was the BBC event, the British Business Club event. Tomorrow there's the Bridge event. We're all really excited. So
there are a number of events now. I mean, traditionally, there were a lot of chambers of commerce here. Now, some of them are still here. They're not as big as they used to be. Some have closed, some have scaled back. But the British Business Club, for example, is more of a social club at the moment because, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of British business here. But we want to make sure that as and when it comes back, we're in a strong position to pick it up and help promote it. So at the moment, the British Business Club is very much a gathering for English-speaking people, not just Brits. It can be other foreigners, it can be English-speaking Russians who want to get together for networking purposes. If you can make some connections through it, fantastic. We try to run events around about once a month. I mean, earlier this year, at the start of the year, we had a Christmas dinner, we've had a pub quiz, we had a charity bowling event, which was great fun. Our team reached the final. We didn't win it, unfortunately, but it was great. We had a beer tasting event recently. Just last week, we were at the summer party. We're putting together the next event for August. So the main thing is to get people together and really just make some connections. But as I said, at the moment, like the bridge, it's mostly social. There are occasionally business slight angles to this, but yeah, it's really just about keeping the people who are still here connected.
Current and future projects of yours?
I went away for just over 2 years to India and Saudi Arabia to work. I've always worked in recruitment for more than 25 years, and I was asked to come back because the latest project we're working on is bringing workers from what we call far abroad into Russia at the blue-collar level, particularly. So there's a huge shortage of, let's say, lower-level workers. And this has been a trend for really since the fall of communism. the Russian population has been declining through a combination of emigration, low birth rates. Unfortunately, longevity is not as impressive as it should be here. There have been some improvements, but nevertheless, there's not enough people to take up the jobs at the lower level. Now, traditionally, Russia has looked to the CIS countries to bring migrant workers in from places like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. The one problem with these people is that once they get here, they're essentially free to work wherever they like. So, which is great for them, but from an employer's perspective, if you've got people on a building site, if the guy gets a call from his buddy tonight and says, hey, come and work for us starting tomorrow, he can leave. Or he can go and work as a courier and make even more money. Yeah. And as an employer, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So,
how do you face that?
Well, you bring in people from what we call far abroad, from places like India. So the bigger advantage of people from countries, not just India, we work with Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Philippines, just to give some examples, is that they're tied to the employer. I mean, obviously they're not slaves. We don't take the passports off them. They're free to leave anytime they like. But the only route out is back home again. So they can't jump from one company to another. So they're here to work. They come in on a year's visa. It's easily extended to a second and third year. So the big advantage is the lack of turnover of staff. But also the main motivation for people from South Asia is to come here for several years to earn money and to send it back home again. So if you go to Dubai, Saudi, Qatar, it's full of people from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Philippines, from all over coming to work and send money home, what we call remittances. And this is becoming a bigger thing here. The authorities like it because it's controlled migration. It's still very new. It's still quite bureaucratic. So whereas in the Middle East, you can have people on your building site within a month, here you're looking at a minimum of 6 months in most cases to bring people in. You've got to pay for their flights. So there's some upfront costs. So it's a tough sell to companies who are not necessarily used to thinking 6, 9, 12 months ahead, but it's very much the future. And when people ask me, how well do they work? I say, go to Dubai. Have you been to Dubai? Yeah. Well, who do you think built Dubai? It wasn't the Arabs. The Arabs financed it. It was the Indians who built it.
How do you make Russian companies believe that, 6 to 12 months is a realistic project?
It's tough, but I think they realize that ultimately this is the future. I mean, if I look at all the companies we're working with, not one who started bringing in Indians has actually said, this didn't work, send them all back, forget it, we're going back to Uzbeks or Russians. Most of them start with a trial project. They say, hey, let's bring in 25 or 50 guys. We obviously give them a lot of advice on how it all works. So not just bringing them here, but we do the selection back in India. We've got some great partners in those countries. And as I said, India just happens to be the biggest donor country because there's a lot of them. But equally, Sri Lanka, Myanmar is a country most people don't know much about. I've been there once.
Thailand. Been there.
Yeah, it's like Thailand 2, 3 generations ago. We're looking at Nepal should open up soon. We're looking at Bangladesh. We even met the deputy ambassador of Pakistan recently. So we're definitely looking at new places. Philippines, at the moment, is mainly for nannies because obviously they speak fluent English. So it's very much the future. And companies are realizing that they're going to have to do this. So the sooner they start,
the better. So considering those international influences, we said that Russians don't smile. Do you think they have started smiling more considering the largely globalized West-driven culture?
I'd say there's a big difference between the Russians who live abroad, have lived abroad, have studied abroad, and the ones who never go abroad. But admittedly, you could probably say the same thing about most countries.
Yeah, for sure.
When people say things like, only 10% of Americans have passports. Well, do you know what? I think I don't know the statistic, but I would guess it's probably about the same in Russia.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I can remember when I went on my school exchange to France in 1987 when I was 14. For a lot of kids in my class, that was their first time abroad. And I come from the southwest of England where you can get on a ferry and a few hours later you're in France. But it just wasn't the done thing back then. People just didn't really go abroad. It's a relatively new thing for a lot of people in the world. And yeah, you know, you can go on holiday, take a vacation to Turkey or Egypt or Thailand quite easily now, even if you don't speak any English. So things are opening up very much. So I think, you know, people are starting to smile a bit more. But if you think about it, the smile that we have in Western or even Asian society is more, not because we're necessarily really happy, but it's to make the person in front of us feel more comfortable, more at ease.
I see. Well, then we're coming to the more controversial questions. So, you travel a lot. What's your favorite city other than Moscow in Russia? And which of them has the most beautiful woman? And ultimately, are Russian women the most beautiful women?
Well, I'll start with the last question. East European women in particular are extremely attractive. There's a lot of reasons why. My personal take on this, yeah, I think my logic of this is the high cheekbones, the schoolie, makes them more attractive. That's just my personal belief. I think a lot of it also comes back, if you go back in the history, the Soviet Union lost 27 million men in the Second World War and God knows how many millions more in the gulags. So a lot of the babushki, the grannies, grew up here, remembering a time when there was no men. There was a huge shortage of guys. So for a lot of time after the Second World War, during the Soviet period, there was huge social pressure on young girls to get married because, you know, you had to grab a guy. Yeah. I mean, if you just have to look at the Russian terminology, that in English you say to get married, whether you're a man or a woman.
Oh, yeah.
So in Russian you say жениться, literally you go and take a wife.
Or выскочить замуж.
Yeah.
To go and like hop into a marriage.
Literally, in Russian you say выйти замуж, which I think technically means you go behind your husband.
Yeah.
Don't tell the Western feminists, but again, it's just an expression, but there is some truth in that if you look at how it works. Now, obviously things are changing. That, you know, and I say this to foreigners who come here, you know, foreign men, I'm like, guys, all right, you can date a girl who is way out of your league, all right, who wouldn't even talk to you back home, but do not think it's because you're so amazing. That's the mistake a lot of people go, oh, wow.
Pen it all down, pen it all down.
Yeah,
everybody.
You know, everything's relative. But also, you know, the 90s when a lot of girls got married for money or to foreigners to go abroad, that's long gone. You know, being a foreigner is not cool anymore. If a Russian girl wants to go abroad, she'll go abroad. Yes, people think, oh, the grass is always greener, but on the other hand, there's equally a number of stories where Russian girls have gone abroad and it hasn't been as rosy as they thought it might be. You know, in Russian you say "Tam хорошо, где нас нет," it's good where we're not. Yeah. In English we say the grass is always greener, and often it isn't. Another thing I found is that a lot of Russians, when they go abroad, don't necessarily mix with each other that much. Now this is changing, especially in the last 5-10 years, that there are more social groups, but nevertheless, Russians do not mix with each other quite as much as, say, we do here. Now, I admit that if you're an expat in Moscow, you will mix with people that you wouldn't necessarily be friends with back home because you've got something in common. Ooh, we're in Moscow. But again, coming back to the original question, we've digressed a bit. I think, yeah, there's some extremely attractive girls here. It's not just the Slavic ones. What you will find is that a lot of the West European men or North American, Australian do like the Asian looking girls. So if you look at all the oil guys who were in Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, pretty much every single one of them went back with an Azeri or Kazakh wife. Yeah. You know, guys will like girls who have the Buryat or Kalmyk look, Uzbek, you know, very pretty girls there.
It's the enchanting eyes, I think.
Yeah. It's also exotic. You have to realize for us, Central Asia, it was totally closed off. It's extremely exotic for us. Again, because for 70 years we couldn't go there. You know, and it's superb. I mean, I love my trips to Central Asia. Doesn't mean I'd necessarily like to live there. Caucasus is another one, great fun. So yeah, I think, you know, you see a lot of guys go crazy. The basic advice I would give to most guys is don't fall for what we call first bird or first chick syndrome. You know, you don't have to marry the first one you meet.
Even if you really want to.
You can do, but I'm just saying, you know, too many guys get here and they're like, oh my God. You know, I still see it. All right. But, you know, there's a reason. I mean, I think girls do make a lot of effort here, which is fantastic. Coming back to which cities I like, obviously Moscow. I love living in Moscow. There's nowhere else I'd rather live. Where do I like going? Well, I've been to 85 regions of Russia.
I was just going to ask you.
I think everywhere is interesting to visit once. So, you know, I would definitely recommend, you know, going to other places. I mean, if you look at TV, if you haven't traveled much, you could be forgiven for thinking that this is a Slav-only country. It's far from it. There's well over 100 nationalities here. There's thousands of Tatars. Go to Tatarstan, Kazan, the capital. I was there last month. Been there many times. Love it there.
It's beautiful.
Great mix of, you know, Tatar, let's say, Islamic culture fused in with Russian. You know, very secular, which is what I like about that. There are 3 Buddhist republics, so Kalmykia, Buryatia, Tuva. I've been to all 3. Buryatia down in the south, it's the only Buddhist republic in Europe. It's really bizarre. You go there and suddenly the people look Asian. Tuva, literally, I think I was the only tourist in town when I went. It feels like a piece of Mongolia inside Russia. You know, I've been to Chukotka, which is literally just before you hit Alaska. You know, you go down to Dagestan, Ingushetia, Chechnya, and again, even Russians for a long time were frightened to go there.
Exactly. I was just going to say.
But that's a stereotype. I mean, a Dagestani guy last time I was there said the most dangerous thing that'll happen in Dagestan is that the local population will overfeed you.
I was just going to say.
So, you know, I had a great time there. The people were very hospitable. You know, so in terms of which cities do I like, in addition, obviously outside of Moscow, Kazan I love. Believe it or not, Khabarovsk, I'm a big fan over in the far east of Russia. Don't know why, but I've always liked my trips to Khabarovsk. I just wished it wasn't so far away.
How many hours is the flight?
Well, it's 6 days by train. It's about a 7-8 hour flight. I think 7 hours there, 8 hours back. But really beautiful. But you could say that about pretty much every Russian city has a beautiful center that is kept spotlessly clean.
Yeah.
And this I find really disappointing when you go back to a lot of cities back home, is there's a lot of trash, a lot of litter everywhere, whereas you don't get that here. You know, there are no homeless people sleeping on the streets in the center. There's no aggressive beggars. There's nobody trying to steal your mobile phone in the center. So it is very safe. So I think, you know, where else do I like to go? Krasnodar, you know, I've always enjoyed. There's a super city. I studied Russian in Yaroslavl, as I said earlier, which is a great getaway for the weekend. You're not going to do a lot of business there, I wouldn't have thought, but it's a very pretty town. All of the Golden Ring towns are easy. You can do some of them on a long day trip, but easily for a weekend away.
Talking about Russia, do you think that you have adopted the Russian soul? Yes, and you said in your book that умом Россию не понять. Do you think that now you are one of them or not really? What's your take on this?
Well, I've lived, I think, almost exactly half my life in Russia, if you add it all up. Now, I think one of the biggest differences, and this was hard for me to get my head around first, was if you want to translate Россию умом не понять, is something like there's no logical way to understand Russia. And this is quite hard for us because our mindset is much more pragmatic, much more logical. So I think when I arrived here, whenever somebody did something or said something, I was trying to find some logic, and often there wasn't any. And this is hard for us because whatever we do, there's always a reasoning behind it. I'll give you a simple example. In my business, recruitment, what typically happens is that you're not happy in your current role, you go for some interviews, you get a better job, you're thinking, oh, dream job, yeah, I get an offer, the pay rise, you know, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, sign it, I'm ready to start. You go back to your boss and say, I'm leaving, and your boss says, oh, no, please don't leave, we love you, here's 20% more cash, please stay. Now, my boring, logical, pragmatic mindset thinks, well, if you thought I was so great, why didn't you pay me this extra cash yesterday? All right. So first of all, back home, it's unusual for a company to say, please stay. They might try and save face and say, oh, is there anything we can do to keep you? But most of the time, no. It'll simply be, all right, well, sorry to see you go. Good luck, have a nice life, keep in touch. In Russia, people will they'll fall for this. And when they say, oh, here's more cash, they love me and they're going to give me more money, yeah, I'll stay. Now, global statistics show that around 80% of people who accept a counteroffer leave within 6 months anyway, because money wasn't the main issue. I don't like my boss, the office is too far away, don't like the job, no chance of promotion. It's just your next pay rise coming a little bit early. And what a lot of companies do here is they pay you to keep you because, what is it, the expression, a warm body is better than nobody. So even if someone's underperforming or they're about to go, it's better to have somebody in doing the job. You quietly look for a replacement behind their back, and as soon as you find the replacement, you kick them out. So my general advice to people is don't accept a counteroffer. But this shows the more emotional side of people, that Russians will often do things, or at least this is what we find, taking an emotional view of things rather than a pragmatic, logical thing. Another example is leaving things till the last minute. Right, recently we had a big event one weekend about a month ago, and ticket sales stopped on the Thursday evening. And on the Friday, you wouldn't believe how many people were calling me, Luke, I want to go, are you going to the event on Saturday? Yeah, of course I am. Well, I tried to book a ticket today and registration closed last night. I said, they've been on sale for 3 months. Oh, well, I didn't know it would close like last night. And it said that on the website. And can you phone someone? Can you do something? And this is very typical. Russians do tend to leave things to the last minute. And anyway, we were at the event and I asked somebody, I was like, why do you do this? And the girl actually had a good answer. She said, because we know that somehow we'll get in.
Yeah.
And I would look at this and just think, why make life difficult for yourself?
Because that way you build a relationship with those who get you in, and then you can do a favor for them. It's like a whole system.
Yeah, but it doesn't always work.
And when it doesn't work, you think about God,
Yeah, sort of inshallah, that's a bit Middle Eastern. I would take a more boring approach to this and think, look, I want to achieve things. So I can remember discussing with colleagues in November, hey, where are you going on holiday for Christmas or New Year? Oh, well, I haven't thought about it yet. Oh, it's too far away. Oh, somebody might get ill. And of course, then middle of December, oh, should we go somewhere? Oh no, the tickets are 3 times more expensive. Oh, they've all gone. The best hotels have gone. I'm like, well, what did you expect? And I just find, look, this is my personal view. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that for me, if you want to achieve more stuff, you need to plan in advance. And one complaint that a lot of expats have about Russians, especially in businesses, people seem to wake up in the morning and do the first thing that comes into their head. That there isn't this sort of planning that we have. Now, again, I don't want to be Germanic about it and start planning things. I don't want to live my entire life in the future. That we used to have clients saying, we'd like to meet this candidate on the 12th of November at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And once I joked, this year or next year. And they actually said, no, this year. They didn't think it was a joke. That's normal. And then 2 days later, they found that guy at 10 o'clock on the 12th of November, can we push him back to 10:15? I was like, are you joking? The guy doesn't know what he's doing tomorrow. Now, there are advantages to this, so that if you're going to a meeting and the meeting's going well, the guy that you're speaking to could say, look, wait here for a minute. I'm just going to go and get the big boss and I'll get him in. Now, back home, that would not happen. There's no way that they would just pull somebody out of somewhere because everybody's lives are pre-planned. And sometimes, maybe I think I've been here too long, but I find it bizarre when somebody abroad messages you on a Monday morning and says, Luke, when can we discuss this project? So I message about, how about now? Oh no, my next available slot isn't until 3:45 on Thursday, and after that I can do 10:15 on the following Tuesday. And I'm like, are you really that busy? Or are you just pretending to be important?
Well, so have you then become, I realized that you understand these differences, and that's all makes a lot of sense. But have you become more emotional? Have you become more like illogical? Do you
I'd say
adopt
I
that?
take a middle ground on this because
Oh, that's very wise.
you know,
That's
yeah,
not fun.
if you start trying to plan things 6 months in advance, then everything changes. The business is fast paced here, and you do need to reconfirm things that. You talk to Germans, and if I am meeting Germans, I could put a meeting in the calendar for 4 o'clock in 3 weeks' time, and it wouldn't move. All right, and I wouldn't need to reconfirm it. I would because I'm in Russia, but I wouldn't need to because it will not move. Whereas here, stuff moves all the time. Now, again, you learn to move things around and use it to your advantage. So I would say there's probably actually more pluses than minuses.
Okay, sure. Got you. Now, have you had any stories at the beginning or nowadays where you have majorly been misunderstood, or where you have misunderstood something and that ended up in a funny story, language related?
Probably very early on. If you take the word nichevo, it has two meanings in Russia. It means okay and nothing.
Yeah.
And when I was a student here in 1993, my landlady, my chazyaika, gave me some kasha, some porridge for breakfast, and said, nichevo, like, is it okay? And I wanted to say it's better than okay. And I said, luche чем nichevo, like, which in Russian sort of translates as it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And of course, she was offended and went over and tried it and thought, no, it's okay. Well, what's wrong with him anyway? And then when I said, da очень вкусно, yeah, it's really nice, then she kind of realized, I think he's made a mistake. But I use this as an example with people because a lot of Russians are very good at reading and writing English, but have this sort of what you call языковой barrier, this sort of language barrier, that they're so worried about making a mistake. Because at school, Ludmila Petrovna, the teacher, would go like, неправильно, wrong, if you made the tiniest mistake, and people were frightened to try. And I say, look, guys, it doesn't matter. You're going to make a mistake. So what? It's going to happen. But if you learn from it and we have a laugh about it, move on, you're going to learn more.
I would love to ask so many more questions, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So, last but not least, the culmination of the interview. Is there a story behind your Facebook запрещенной социальной сети в России nickname Luka Ivanovic Petrov?
Other way around, Luka Petrovich Ivanna.
Luka Petrovich Ivanov.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. This was kind of as a joke, as a reaction, because Luke is obviously a biblical name. In Russian it's Luka. Jones would be Ivanov, technically, from John. Yeah. Now, in Western society, we don't have a patronymic name which comes from your father. And my dad is Peter, so my patronymic would be Luka Petrovich. Now, I did this because I started receiving CVs. Somebody would send me their resume, and instead of Yelena, they would put Helen, or they put Michael instead of Mikhail. The one that really got me was Eugene.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, why do you call yourself Eugene? Or because it is easier for foreigners to pronounce. I'm like, look, all right, your name is Yevgeny. And the problem with this is it actually causes more issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we had a situation where, similar name, Yevgenia, called herself Jane. And she was working for a foreign company. And somebody in HR in the UK said, could you please send us Jane's details? So I was like, Yevgenia, whatever. No, we don't need Yevgenia, we need Jane. And of course, I was like, well, actually, she just calls herself that to make your life easier. And so they're like, why are you making this difficult? Because if you call yourself one thing and you put Kate or Catherine instead of Yekaterina on your resume, and then you send your passport through and it doesn't match, they're like, well, you're not the same person. Yeah. Now, I get it if you go abroad, because again, like, Lyudmila is not going to be easy for some people to pronounce. Yeah. And also, if you think about it, a lot of surnames will be slightly different. You put A at the end. Whereas our surnames don't change. And some people would say, look, why have you and your husband got different sounding surnames? So I kind of get it while people do it. And it was a reaction early on. It was more as a joke. It's a bit like saying malinki mягкие форточки for Microsoft Windows. All right, just translating stuff literally. Yeah. Whereas that wouldn't translate.
Okay, great fun. Thank you so much. This is amazing.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Subscribe to Braiden Consulting, subscribe to Luc's social media. We're going to link all of that below. And if you want to speak Russian just as well as Luc, join our free Russian lessons. The link is going to be in the description. And yeah, look out for more amazing interviews at Braiden Consulting. Thank you so much. See you soon.